So I'm Ganesh Bagler. I'm going to tell you very briefly about my journey in CCMB and importantly, that of computational gastronomy, the story which is unfolding in my lab for the last 6 years or so. Uh, I'll be telling you about what is computational gastronomy, what are the different foundations that we are setting up for this new niche in my lab, as well as what are the futuristic perspective that we see through the lens when we look at food through the lens of data. That's what I intend to do in the coming 40 minutes or so. So I'm from IIIT Delhi. I'm presently at IIIT Delhi Center for Computational Biology, where we are trying to apply the knowledge of computer science to various aspects of biology, which includes food incidentally. Given the fact that I'll be talking about computational gastronomy, if you think I must have been a foodie all the time, I must tell you that you can never, you will definitely be wrong on that. As a teenager, I always aspired to be an astronomer. So it was an adventure for somebody who is aspiring to be an astronomer to be landing up in CCMB incidentally. So starting from an aspiring astronomer as a teenager, that has been a long journey from physics, training in physics, in quantum mechanics, in astrophysics, then coming all the way in computer science, where I did a degree MTech in computational techniques. And after which, with my CSIR fellowship, I ended up joining in CCMB. And that definitely was one of the most adventurous patch of my life that I lived in CCMB, I must tell you that. I'll be giving you a very short glimpse of that. Of course, I went through a couple of postdocs at NCBS and Max Planck Institute of Molecular Genetics before returning to India, having a journey from a CSIR lab in a beautiful place called Palampur, IHBT, Institute of Himalayan Bioresource Technology, IIT Jodhpur, all the way from Himalayas to desert, and then coming to IIIT Delhi, where I am right now. So that's been a long journey from astronomy to gastronomy is what I like to describe as. CCMB, as I said, was an important juncture in all of this journey. I still remember the day on which this notification was released by CCMB, where 18 of us were selected to join for PhD program. And some of them probably are there in this meeting right now. And I can't forget the date because it happened to be my birthday on which I was selected. And after that, of course, I spent a lot of time at CCMB investigating biological entities. My notes, CCMB diary notes, were filled with a lot of ideas, including exciting things such as networks and how application of networks is going to revolutionize biology. I gave lots of talks, esoteric talks, I must say, of which one of them was this on love, actually, a light-hearted analysis of romantic love. It was given on 8th of May. I don't recall the year. Then I also talked about, there are various events and, avenues under which I talked, but that included talking about Van Gogh's paintings and a very esoteric phenomena of scaling in the Van Gogh's painting. I also looked at data from India Times where models were ranked according to their popularity and came up with an interesting model about how they end up getting the kind of ranking that they get. This data was unpublished, of course. And I worked on Airport Network of India, which was published eventually. So you can imagine that apart from working on biological systems, I did a lot of interesting things while I was in CCMB. I also ran a gel. This was my last gel. I was never allowed to enter a molecular biology lab after I ran this gel. So this was my last experiment there. And as part of my PhD, this is what I did. Using graph theory as a paradigm for understanding protein structures, their function and kinetics. The design part, I ended up doing it later when I returned to India at IHBT. So that's what I worked on, using network modeling for understanding protein structures. Throughout this process, throughout this time, right from my PhD days, close to 20 years now, I have been looking at biological complex systems as special entities, which includes protein structures, complex diseases at cellular level, neuronal networks and how neurons are interconnected, giving rise to interesting phenomena that we know brain has. And importantly, the focus of today's talk, which is that of food as a complex system. That's what I have been doing for the last 20 years, starting from the journey at CCMB. So coming to the theme of today's talk, that of computational gastronomy. So what is computational gastronomy? It is a data science which blends food, data, and the power of computation to achieve data-driven food innovations. That's what, in summary, the definition of computational gastronomy is all about. What it tries to achieve is to put together three disparate things: food, data, which is never thought to be aligned with the notion of food as such, and of course, the computational algorithms. And I'll be telling you about how we are, achieving this, setting up the foundations of this particular niche. May I request those who are on not mute? Guru, you are not on mute. Can you mute yourself? Thank you.
Yes. So from where you got the
Rajaraman, you may want to mute probably as an organizer. Yeah, thank you. So having got the definition of computational gastronomy, giving you an essence of what it tries to do, think about food. Incidentally, food has always been thought as an artistic endeavor. Food has evolved over centuries, if not more than that, in terms of achieving the kind of delicious dishes that cultures have, starting with raw ingredients by processing them through specialized protocols. And these protocols, called recipes, are ingrained into our culture. So food is an artistic endeavor at the end of the day. And it is so much ingrained into humanity that it is considered to be the very essence. The cooking is considered to be the very essence of being human. It has been argued that the exceptionally large brain sizes that we have has been possible because a huge amount of time was opened up because of our ability to cook and get a large amount of nutrition through the cooked food, right? Given the fact that food has been taking its own journey of evolution, innovations through trial and error, that is what chefs have been doing. That's what food enthusiasts have been doing for a long period of time. Question is, how is food going to look in 21st century? Standing in the middle of data revolution in this century, can data help us revolutionize food? Can we make food computable? That's the kind of questions we started asking starting from 2015 in my lab. And I believe that through computational gastronomy, we are going to change the face of the food as we see it today. The way we eat food, the way we cook food, the way we look at food is going to change dramatically the moment you start looking at food through the lens of data. Computational gastronomy entails various aspects of food, the jigsaw pieces of food puzzle, if you wish. The traditional recipes aspect of it, the flavor profiles of the ingredients, their nutritional profile, and the kind of health impacts they have on us. All of these and many more are part of what could be called as the jigsaw pieces of the food puzzle. We have been building the data foundation on various aspects, including these four aspects in my lab. Notice that no science can become, or no aspect of life can become data science unless a strong foundation of well-curated data is provided to it. And incidentally, in the case of food, it has been lacking. And that's what we are trying to build in my lab. And these are a couple of examples. RecipeDB and FlavorDB, both published in different journals, are repertoires of such kind of data, the gastronomic data. RecipeDB is a structured repository of more than 118,000 recipes from across the globe, which includes 26 world regions and 84 countries. And the recipes are broken down into their constituent ingredients, their nutritional profile, the kind of dietary style that the recipe belongs to, amount of quantity of ingredient that goes into it, what kind of cooking protocol is used, even what kind of utensils are being used. All have been in a very structured manner and a queryable manner provided as part of this data repository. Similarly, FlavorDB is a comprehensive database of flavor molecules which are found in natural ingredients which go into the recipes, and the molecules' character in terms of what taste and odor do they have. So these are a couple of databases of the many that we have built in our lab, which are letting us ask interesting questions. So I started my journey of computational gastronomy. The name was non-existent at that point of time in IIT Jodhpur while teaching a class of complex networks. while teaching to these students of undergraduate students of computer science, electrical and communication engineering, some mechanical engineering students, I ended up landing onto this philosophical and deep question. Why do we eat what we eat? It's very difficult and challenging question to answer. So we simplified it further by assuming that anything that we eat, any dish that we eat, is essentially nothing but a set of ingredients, a special combination of ingredients. With that notion, the question gets transformed into this one. Why do we combine ingredients the way we do in our recipes? Turns out that there is no easy answer to this question, right? Why is it that certain combination of ingredients are used far more frequently in recipes vis-a-vis the other combinations? If you ask that, well, turns out that no easy answer coming to this question. Incidentally, one of the answer that was coming from a chef, an expert chef, was from Heston Blumenthal. Chef Heston Blumenthal from UK proposed this hypothesis called food pairing hypothesis, where he said that ingredients that taste similar tend to go well with each other. That's what he proposed. And here, similarity refers to how do they taste and what is their odor. Largely speaking, their flavor profile is what he was referring to. And in 2011,
इसका सुनो भाई, इसका सुनो गणेश गणेश बगलर
in one of the research articles that was published in 2011, incidentally, it was shown that the food pairing hypothesis works well in many of the Western cuisines, the North American, Latin American, Southern and Eastern European cuisines, in which the food pairing hypothesis was seen to be true. Well, I got this idea that in the context of the Indian recipes, could this hypothesis still be true? And that was the question we wanted to investigate, which had not been done until then. So we started looking at the data premise of the Indian recipes, and we figured out that there was hardly any available. So we started collecting these data of Indian recipes, and we hit upon various online repositories and fixated ourselves onto the Tarla Dalal's website, from where we compiled a set of 2,500 odd recipes, which were composed of approximately 200 odd ingredients across the length and the breadth of the country. I know that this is a coarse-grained data, not accommodating all regional cuisines that are there in India. However, this was the first step taken towards quantifying recipes and the flavor of the recipes. So starting with this data of recipes, ingredients, and their ingredient categories, which are shown on the left-hand side, we further broke it down further in terms of their flavor profiles, because the reason any ingredient is used in a recipe, the chili, the tomato, onion, tamarind, the reason why they are used in any given recipe is because primarily of their taste and odor. The way they interact with the olfactory and gustatory mechanisms gives rise to the fragrance and the aroma that they have, and that is why they are used. So we wanted to compile the molecular basis of the taste and odor, which happens to be the flavor molecules. So we spanned through literature, through published literature of books and research articles, and ended up compiling flavor molecules for these 200 odd ingredients in 2015. That way, we now have the data in a tripartite layer. We have the data of recipes from a given cuisine, the Indian cuisine in this case. We have the data of ingredients of which these recipes are composed of. And finally, the flavor molecules that go into these ingredients, and they are contributing to the taste and odor of these ingredients. Having got this tripartite data, the next thing that we wanted to do was to see how can we quantify the flavor of a recipe or a taste of a recipe. And that's how we ended up defining what could be called as the food pairing index. So you start with the cuisine, which has been shown on the top, and look at individual recipes, such as the caricature recipe, which has been shown in the picture, break it down into its constituent ingredients, look at what are the ingredients that are present in them. In this case, there are 4 ingredients that are shown to be present in this recipe. You make all pairwise combination of ingredients, like in this case of onion and coconut, and ask this question about how many molecules are common between these two ingredients. That will end up giving us some answer in terms of number of common molecules. And when you take an average across all pairs, you end up getting one number. So that's the food pairing index, average number of shared flavor molecules across all pairs of ingredients. That's what you end up getting here. Having got such a number, what are we trying to do here? What are we trying to achieve? So the idea here is this. Starting with same set of ingredients, a basket of vegetable, lentil, another basket of dairy products, etc. You have categories of ingredients sitting in front of you. If you were to put them randomly together, arbitrarily compile them together to create what could be called as monkey recipes, this is an equivalent of monkey going to a kitchen and trying to cook. It is trying to put things together in an arbitrary fashion. You will still end up getting a cuisine because of random combinations. And the recipe or the cuisine would still have some food pairing index. Compared to such food pairing index of a randomized or a monkey cuisine, what is the food pairing index for that of a real cuisine is the question that we are asking. And turns out that for Western cuisines, you tend to have ingredient combinations that have more and more similarity in them, which is the so-called uniform blend of ingredients, which is what we end up finding in the Western cuisines. As opposed to that, what we ended up observing in the case of Indian cuisine was that of a contrasting blend of ingredients that is typically found in Indian recipes. Well, that is how we ended up quantifying recipes and finding an interesting pattern that is present in the Indian recipes and Indian cuisines in general. We extended this experiment one more layer. We wanted to find out if there is any particular category of an ingredient which is specifically contributing towards the observed food pairing. And for that reason, what we did was to take the whole cuisine and look at all ingredient slots, which are vegetable, spice, dairy, etc., category of ingredient. And we did what could be called as an intra-category shuffling, keeping everything else same. For example, all the ingredients of dairy, lentil, etc., all other categories will remain exactly in their own place, except, let's say, for vegetable, if you were to shuffle all vegetables randomly, what would happen to the food pairing is the question that we asked. And turns out that such intra-category shuffling marginally changed the food pairing as shown in the picture. Starting from the original food pairing that was shown in this blue dot, they change marginally depending on which category of ingredient you shuffle, except for one category of an ingredient. And you can try and make a guess out of it about which category of an ingredient is so critical in terms of its placement in Indian cuisine. And you wouldn't be too wrong in guessing that. Turns out that spices, the placement of spices in Indian cuisine, Indian recipes is extremely critical, and changing cinnamon with a clove with a cardamom changes the food pairing pattern in a manner that is dramatically changing the food pairing in the Indian cuisine. That's what we ended up observing. And we called, therefore, that the spice is the molecular fulcrum of Indian cuisine. It is the taste of India. To take a spoof on one of the Indian brands, that's what we ended up concluding. So that was the first ever experiment in the context of Indian cuisine, wherein we quantified certain aspect of cuisine in terms of recipe, ingredient, flavor molecules, defined and quantified food pairing index, and found out something interesting, an interesting pattern, and what is responsible for that pattern in the context of Indian recipes. This particular experiment was in fact extended further to find what could be called as the culinary fingerprints. Like a DNA fingerprint uniquely identifies an individual, a culinary fingerprint characterizes a cuisine in terms of various quantifiable parameters. And that's what culinary fingerprint represents. And we ended up finding the idiosyncratic patterns that are present in various parts of India, in regional cuisines of India, using culinary fingerprinting. In 2015, when we did this research, it was considered as an emerging technology, highlighting the emergence of computational gastronomy as a new niche, as a new science altogether. And it got a lot of press, a lot of ink across various media outlets across the world, close to 250 odd media outlets highlighted it. It is a part of a book called Indian Pantry now. It's a full chapter in this book called Indian Pantry, written by Veer Sanghvi out of his Rude Food column. And also it got attention by academia in terms of this Chemistry World magazine article in Royal Society of Chemistry. Not to forget, chefs enthusiastically appreciated our results and they wanted to use this research for their recipe innovation aspect of their work. And they indeed started doing it, including Chef Garima Arora, who is pictured in this particular slide, who is one of the India's first Michelin star chefs in Bangkok in a restaurant called Ga. Well, turns out that technological advances happen largely by putting together by existing pieces of knowledge. And same way, computational gastronomy tries to bridge food and artificial intelligence, thereby by being on the sweet spot of the food. And that is what was identified by industry, and they highlighted it as the sweet spot of the food. Having told you this story that happened in 2015, and before I move forward and tell you about what is the future that I'm portraying for this new science, let me tell you some of the lacunas and some of the issues that must be lingering in your mind as well. A recipe is not an unordered list of ingredients. The order matters, the quantity matters, the processing technique which has been used, sauteing, boiling, frying, roasting, also matters in changing the flavor profile. Further, the combination of ingredients would end up giving rise to emergent properties in terms of their taste and odor. That also needs to be taken into account. Exactly in a similar manner, when we look at the data of ingredients and the flavor profile, another question comes in terms of what is the concentration of these flavor molecules and what is the potency of these molecules, not to mention, again, the emergent properties of molecules coming together, giving rise to a completely different odor profile or a taste profile of a given molecule. And not to forget sociological questions, anthropological questions, which are of relevance, which is, how do you call this cuisine as an Indian cuisine? Can I take a representative set of 2,500 odd recipes and call it an Indian cuisine? Am I not ignoring a large number of recipes? Am I not considering the variations in the recipes? All of these questions are extremely valid. As a physicist and a mathematician, I have taken an approach that of what a typical physicist would do. To say that when given a challenge of modeling a cow, a physicist would typically start by saying that let's assume that the cow is spherical. The cow is not, of course, spherical, but it provides us the first level of assumption with which we can move forward and build the very first model, which can be refined and can be brought closer to the reality. That's the idea, and that's the notion which is going into such simplistic models. Now, to tell you about the future, we are looking at food from a data perspective, and the agenda that we have on our table is to make food computable and to achieve data-driven food innovations. These are the two things that we want to do as part of the computational gastronomy paradigm. And there are three dimensions that I'll be very briefly touching upon. One is the recipes dimension. The second, sorry for that, it's flipping continuously. The second dimension is that of the molecular level. And the third is the nutrition and health aspect of it. So let me take you through one by one. Going beyond the investigation and quantification of Indian recipes and Indian cuisines, we have touched upon the world recipes. We investigated more than 145,000 recipes from across the world and have found out the culinary fingerprints of various regions of the world cuisines. There are 26 world regions and 84 countries that we have accounted for this particular analysis. It's an important sign that computational gastronomy is getting acceptance into academia, that a computer science conference, international conference on data engineering by IEEE, has a special workshop as part of this called Decor, which looks at recipe data analytics, which is where we ended up getting the best paper award when we presented this work on culinary fingerprints of the world cuisine. Going further, one of the most interesting questions one can ask is, how have cuisines evolved over the last few thousands of years? If you consider, for example, around 15,000 years of agricultural revolution, recipes have evolved, cuisines have evolved dramatically. And there are similarities and dissimilarities between these cuisines, which can be quantified now thanks to the kind of analysis that is happening as part of computational gastronomy. Can we come up with a better understanding of similarities and dissimilarities between cuisines, thereby building potentially the first ever world cuisine tree? Those are the kind of questions that we are asking in our lab, trying to build models of culinary evolution. You know, how starting with primitive recipes, cuisines and recipes end up evolving the way they do and create the kind of wide and rich repository of recipes that today's cuisines tend to have. Well, this is one of the trees that we have built, which gives you insight largely from a geocultural perspective in terms of similarities of cuisines as well as distances between them, as can be seen from this dendrogram. How many recipes are theoretically possible? If you were to do a back of the envelope calculation, it throws out a number which is astronomically large. And this is a realistic calculation. In fact, the real number is much larger than this. Thanks to the power of computation, today we are in a place where we can try all permutations and combinations to be able to play with computer generated recipes. So the question therefore is, can computers cook? Well, that's the question we are trying to answer in our lab today. Can we capture the intelligence and intuition of a human chef into a computer program? We are writing natural language processing algorithms which will extract meaningful information, the structured information from human readable recipes, and further use it for building new recipes out of it, the novel recipe generation algorithm. In today's date, artificial intelligence is trying to achieve or trying to imitate the human intuition and intelligence. People are trying to recapture what it meant to be a Beethoven or a Mozart, or what it meant to be a Shakespeare, trying to regenerate those texts and those symphonies. In a similar manner, probably we can try to regenerate the A.R. Rahman's music and call it AI Rahman, right? So in a similar vein, in this movie Ratatouille, I'm sure many of you are smiling in your cheek, must have seen this movie, wherein Chef Gustav keeps saying that anyone can cook. So we are extending this logic all the way up to computer to say, can computers cook? In fact, we would like to build a Turing test for chef, where we will challenge the chef to distinguish between a computer generated recipe versus that of a real recipe. And in fact, we have already published some work on these lines, which has been shown here, and are creating interfaces such as Ratatouille, which is already available for testing out. By Monday onwards, it will be available. Right now, it was running through a crash because too many people were testing it out. So now it is shut down, but by Monday, it will be available for testing. You can mark this URL, Ratatouille, wherein we can choose ingredients and generate a recipe, a human readable recipe, which can be potentially be tried. Will these recipes be palatable? Will these recipes be further tasty? Can these be made healthy? These are the further steps that we are working on. However, the very first step is to generate the recipes which are good enough to fool a chef. And that's the step we are working on. Having told you about what is happening in the space of recipes, let me tell you what is happening in the space of molecules. We realize that there is a huge potential in trying to compile flavor molecules which are found in natural ingredients that go into the recipes. So this data was available in a completely scattered manner. What we did in around 2016 was to compile all of these data in a single place, and we called it FlavorDB, which happens to be today the world standard when it comes to flavor molecules data from natural ingredients. And this data provides you a structured, layered information of ingredients, their natural sources, the molecules which are found in ingredients, their taste and odor attributes, and their molecular properties. All of this data is available as part of FlavorDB. Starting with such data, one can even ask some interesting questions, which some of you might be interested in, such as, can you predict the taste of a small molecule, like a peptide, but similarly, in this case, we are using a small molecule. Can you predict the taste, whether it is bitter, sweet, salty, sour, or umami? As a first step, we have built state-of-the-art machine learning algorithms for predicting the bitter and sweet taste on the axis of bittersweet. And we call it bittersweet algorithm. It is available as a published GitHub repository, which you can use it for your purpose and work on it. a software which can be implemented by anyone on their desktop. And thirdly, as a user-friendly interface, the URL of which is flashed in front of you, wherein you can actually draw a molecule or submit a file with smiles, and you should be able to get prediction done with an accuracy of around 90% using these machine learning algorithms. The last dimension that we are working on towards these efforts is that of the health. The way human body interacts with food is way too complex, given making it extremely challenging to predict health consequences of food that we consume on a day-to-day basis. One of the solutions towards this, one of the ways to solve this problem through a computational approach is to build an integrative repository of food disease associations, where you have a lot of contradictory evidence which keeps propping up. So we wanted to integrate this data, and for that reason, we have looked at more than 38,000 research articles which are made available through Medline, and have applied text mining algorithms to mine through the title and the abstract of these research articles to be able to come up with food disease associations in terms of their positive associations as well as negative associations. We have further integrated these data with that of chemicals which are found in the food, as well as the genetic linkages. The only linkage which is missing in this particular frame, which has been shown to you, is that of food gene association. We don't have that data empirically available. Therefore, DietRx, the interface that we have created, does not have it. And this research article is under review, but the data is available online for you to explore. You search by DietRx and our lab or my name, and you should be able to get this data online. Towards the end of it, I would like to say that computational gastronomy approaches, computational approaches taken towards food are making us reach towards a direction where we can achieve potentially personalized nutrition. In this landmark research article from Weizmann Institution, these researchers ended up putting together information, gathering information from various body parameters, and integrated that with one food that was consumed, a real food that is consumed in the breakfast, to predict the postprandial glucose level, increase in glucose post-meal, with the help of a machine learning algorithm, which has been shown as personalized nutrition predictor. And this happened to be having an accuracy which is better than the conventional method, which work on the nutrition profile of the food that we consume. Given that, I'm a strong believer of the fact that one can actually reach to a future where it should be possible for me to make recommendations, food recommendations, recipe recommendations, which are suited to your body type, which will be useful to you towards improving health, and hopefully they would be tasty as well. To summarize, computational gastronomy takes a data science approach to food. It looks at food through the lens of data and tries to achieve data-driven food innovations. And towards these directions, it provides various tools from artificial intelligence and machine learning, such as tool of food beverage pairing, taste odor prediction of small molecules, culinary fingerprinting of the cuisines, dietary intervention strategies through various diets that can be designed, food and beverages design, which is important for food and beverages company, as well as potentially ways for achieving sustainable food innovations by trying to incorporate local and seasonal ingredients into our recipes. So these are various directions towards which computational gastronomy works. And in short, it tries to make food computable, something which has not happened until now. So with that, I would like to conclude my pitch with this particular quote from Brillat-Savarin, the person who wrote the book Physiology of Taste and coined the word gastronomy for the first ever time. While it has taken us more than 250 years to achieve the niche of computational gastronomy after Brillat-Savarin, the essence of what Brillat-Savarin said still remains true. The discovery of a new dish confers more happiness on humanity than the discovery of a new star. And I'm pretty confident that computational gastronomy approaches will help us achieve that to make humanity happier and healthier. So thank you for listening to me patiently, and I'm available for any questions that you may have now. In case it is taken